We have our own Mr. Arthur Murray in AT&T Sports.
Okay, thank you. Hi, guys. How are you guys doing today? And we have a special treat for us. We have the general manager from AT&T Sports, and we have a unique partnership that David actually brought to our attention, and Dean Brown. And it's going to be to give our students an opportunity to work with them, to learn from them. As you guys know, they put on the AT&T Sports. They put on the Rockets games. They also put on the Astros games, and they also do some of our Texans Celtics games as well. So special treat, the general manager, David Peart, is here with us, guys. So enjoy. David, it's all on you.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm thrilled to be thrilled to be with you guys this afternoon. What I thought I'd do is I put together a couple of PowerPoint slides and maybe take a couple of minutes to walk through those slides, give you a little bit of information about how we do what we do, and then from that perspective, be in a position to share with you some information about the network. I always want to know who's talking to me and a little bit about that individual. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction about my career and what I do. Also introduce to you some information related to more broadly regional sports networks, commonly referred to as RSNs, and you'll hear me use that phrase quite a bit as I walk through these slides. Some information about our network here in Houston, and then talk a little bit about the dramatic change in the way we do our jobs now with COVID compared to just a year ago, or a little over a year ago. And so background, some information about me. I've been in sports, media, and entertainment for 30 years. I've served as a senior executive for professional teams in the NFL, NHL, and Major League Baseball. I've been the part of a member of championship organizations in various leagues with a number of different teams, and have also had the great fortune of being a part of host committee for Super Bowl events, Major League Baseball All-Star games, NHL All-Star games, among many other major events. I've been blessed and fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. Some of the organizations that I have worked for include the Pittsburgh Penguins, Dallas Stars, Texas Rangers, Houston Texans, San Francisco 49ers. I like to say I have a diverse business background. My dad tells me I have a hard time keeping a job. So somewhere in between there is the breadth of my career. I've also been on the business side, and currently the job I have right now is more business than it is sports in the media business. But I've worked for a company called Network International. I had a consulting company that I created several years ago, did that for a period of time, and now with AT&T SportsNet. So my current job right now, I thought I'd give you a snapshot of what our organization looks like. And I think most people, when you think about a regional sports network, you're probably thinking about the live game coverage that we do. We have a staff of about 50 individuals that work for us full-time that make up these various departments. And if I'm in your chair and going through college and learning about this business, the question I have is, where do I fit in? What do I need to learn and know in order to work for an organization like this? And this, whether you're a regional sports network or whether you're a local over-the-air affiliate, these different disciplines would probably be fairly universal. So starting from the top to the bottom, ad sales and traffic, pretty simple, right? They sell all of the commercial times on our network. They're responsible for all of the brands, sponsor brands that you see integrated into the broadcast. That's the ad sales part. The traffic part is to make sure they're the promise keepers. They're the ones that make sure that what we commit to our advertising sponsors actually hits the air in the right way. Marketing promotes. They're the outward-facing voice of our RSN. They promote and market. They promote TuneIn. They promote the brand. They help us with our social media platforms. Those are the individuals that are in the marketing side. Programming, we have a department that is responsible for making sure that when you turn our network on, there's some form of programming, whether it's paid programming, live sports coverage, or maybe it's a national programming that we're receiving from another part of the country. But that programming department is has the responsibility for sourcing that material, identifying it, and making sure that it's formatted and that we have something on the air that is consistent with our brand and our presentation standards. Production, that's the area that we're probably most all familiar with, including the live games that we produce. We'll do about 250 live games a year. We also do studio shows and magazine shows. So in our region, studio shows, every time we do a live game broadcast, we have a pre and a post game show. And for our two teams, the Astros and the Rockets, we do magazine shows. Every week that we produce, we have a team of producers and reporters and editors that work on those programs as well. And then when you look at the makeup of staffing, for the live games, the staffing is primarily freelance or contract workers. So although we have 50 full-time staff that make up the vast majority of folks that are in those different disciplines on the left side of the screen, on a game night at Minute Maid Park or at Toyota Center, we'll have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 freelance and subcontractors that come in specifically to help us produce those games. So those are camera operators, technicians that support the broadcast part of those live games. And then on the studio and magazine shows, those are handled by our internal staff of editors, producers, videographers. Those individuals work for us full time. They're a part of that group of 40 individuals that we have on our staff, on our full-time staff. So the RSN landscape, regional sports networks, there's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 or so of those regional sports networks. Numbers changing a little bit with consolidation and sort of the combination of some of the networks, where there may be two regional networks forming one. There's a significant change in the industry underway. I'll talk about that in just a little bit from a business perspective. But the primary groups in this space include Bally Sports, that they are formerly Fox SportsNet. There's 19 of those networks. AT&T Sports Network, that's the group that I work for. We have 4 networks. And the NBC Sports Regional Networks, that's formerly Comcast SportsNet. In fact, CSN Houston was the network in this region prior to us taking it over. You can see those brand and those identities. Bally Sports, actually, the brand will be introduced the end of this month. So that's a new logo, a new identity. Right now, they are branded still under the Fox SportsNet logo, but they will soon be morphed into Bally Sports. And then there's a handful of independents. Yes Network, Marquee Sports Network, which is in Chicago. The Yes Network is the New York Yankees. They're in New York, the New York metro area. Spectrum Sports, that's in Los Angeles. Masson in the Mid-Atlantic area, that's the Nationals and the Baltimore Orioles are on that network. SNY is that's in New York as well. That's the Mets Regional Sports Network. And Altitude Sports, they're in Denver. They carry the Avalanche and the Nuggets in the Denver market, along with a couple of other pro teams on their network. So that'll give you sort of a snapshot of regional sports networks across the country. For the most part, they don't overlap. We're unique in that in our region, we have a 5-state region, which I'll show you in just a minute. but in our region, we actually overlap with one of the Valley sports networks. So our group includes 4 RSNs, Pittsburgh with the Penguins and the Pirates. Southwest, that's our network, is Rockets and Astros. Rocky Mountain, they're located in Denver. They're the Jazz, the Golden Knights, and the Colorado Rockies. And then Northwest in Seattle. We currently air the Mariners games, broadcast the Mariner games. We just announced that we will also be broadcasting the new, actually should be NHL Seattle Kraken, which is the new hockey team that will start playing next year. So those are our 4 networks. AT&T SportsNet Southwest, Astros Rockets are our 2 primary properties. You can see the network territory includes 5 states: Louisiana, Arkansas, Oklahoma, all of Texas, and the eastern portion of New Mexico. There's approximately 4.2 million households in those 5 states, not 42 million. That's a typo, but 4.2 million households. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll produce about 250 live events each year that will air on our network. So our network is delivered to those 4.2 million subscribers through these 4 primary platform groups. So if you have on the left what's commonly referred to as linear platforms, DirecTV is a satellite provider, Uverse, Xfinity, BTEL, Consolidated, and Touch, Phonoscope. All of those linear platforms are your traditional paid TV platforms. So that was, up until the last handful of years, the most likely way you would get a regional sports network. And the vast majority of our subscribers sit in that group. On the right-hand side at the top, OTT is short for over the top. That is a web-based platform that delivers our channel and other channels over the internet. And so those platforms are relatively new. They've come into play here recently with the advent and introduction and success of Netflix. There are a number of other OTTs that do recorded programming delivered over the internet. There are a handful of others that deliver pay TV. So you can get the full complement of ESPN and CNN on those platforms, live programmatic television delivered over the internet. So for us, it's AT&T TV Now and Fubo. This is really the way that this industry is going. More and more subscribers are actually what is commonly referred to as cord cutting. So they're eliminating their linear paid television service and they are opting for the more flexible OTT platforms. We also deliver our programs via a private labeled app. So we have an AT&T SportsNet app. If you're a subscriber to one of the OTT or one of the linear channels, then you would have access to that app. Or Major League Baseball also delivers. And if you are what's commonly referred to as an authenticated subscriber, you're already paying for the service on the linear side, then you would have the ability to watch it, stream it on your handheld device or on your smart TV on one of those apps. So those are the platforms that we use to deliver our network. And you have to be a subscriber to one of these platforms in order to watch the games that we produce. To give you a sense of the type of programming that we're producing, we refer to them as tiers. So tier 1, those are the pro teams that we broadcast, the Astros and the Rockets. Those are the 2 primary programming elements that we have. We invest probably 90% of our time on those two properties. Our tier two, those are regionally relevant teams. And Arthur mentioned at the outset, we do carry the TSU home games on our network. We're very proud to have the Tigers on our network. We also carry the Major League Rugby team, the Houston SaberCats. There are a number of other local programming elements that we have, but those would be the two most recognizable tier two properties that we have. And then tier three, and those are the shows you're probably most familiar with, seeing maybe late at night or in off hours. We do outdoor programming, magazine shows, nationally syndicated sports. We carry, World Poker Association and MMA programming. That would all be classified as tier three programming for us. From a Rocket standpoint, we're right in the middle of just sort of cross the midway point for the Rockets. From a Rockets perspective, we'll do about 70 Rockets broadcasts. We do preseason games for the Rockets, pre-post game shows, Rockets All Access, which is our magazine show. And then we do have the rights to carry the Rockets' first round of the NBA playoffs if they're competing. And so we'll produce those games as well. And then on the baseball side with the Astros, we'll do somewhere in the neighborhood of 155 to 170 regular season games, spring training games, pre and post game shows each night that we have a game. And then Astros Bases Loaded is the other program, a weekly magazine that we produce for the Astros as well. All produced, all of that programming by our staff or by the contractors that we hire for those specific games that we're producing. A little bit more information about the programs that we produce on the Astros side. Magazine show Astros Bases Loaded. We also do another 30-minute show that we produce, the On Deck show with the Astros. And then on the Rockets side again, and that recaps the information related to the Rockets programming. On the Astros side, our territory, the Astros games are broadcast to the entire territory that we cover, all 5 states. On the Rockets side, however, there are carve-outs for the other teams. We are not allowed to broadcast, and we have to black out the Rockets games. As you can see, we don't broadcast into San Antonio, into Dallas, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma City Thunder are located. There's some spillover from the Memphis Grizzlies in Arkansas, so we don't broadcast there. And we do not broadcast in Louisiana. Our Rockets games are blacked out in those parts of our territory. So you can see the difference between our reach for Astros and our reach for Rockets. To give you some perspective related to the programming that we're producing, our Astros games will reach somewhere in the neighborhood of 90,000 plus individuals on a game-by-game basis. That's the far left column here. Our household impressions for a game broadcast. I have represented here both the 19 and 20 season. To put that in context, the Astros will average at Minute Maid Park. They'll average somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30,000 fans for a home game. So we're reaching almost 3 times that number for a broadcast. And then from a demographic standpoint, you can see the breakdown based on age demographic. The second column from the left, adults 25 to 54 will reach somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 individuals that fall in that age demographic, and so on down the line. 35 to 64, somewhere in the neighborhood of 65 to 70,000 individuals will tune in on a nightly basis for those games, for those Astros games on our network. By comparison, when you compare our Astros broadcast to the local prime time coverage for the local affiliates, if you look at the upper left-hand corner, we are about one rating point, and each rating point is worth about 25,000 individuals. We're one rating point better on average than NBC, ABC, CBS. So if you're looking to reach viewers in prime time when the Astros are playing, the vast majority of folks between 7 and 10 p.m. in prime time will be watching our network for Astros games compared to those other three networks in the marketplace. So I think that's interesting from our perspective, right? We're in competition from an ad sales perspective to reach marketers and advertisers. And a lot of times people think The Voice or The Bachelor or some of those programs will be reaching the largest segment of the audience. But in fact, live sports coverage by the local home team is going to be more effective at reaching those audiences than even those primetime programs. The other advantage that we have for baseball specifically is during the summertime, most network programming is in reruns, and Major League Baseball is live, local, first-run programming. So it is, in actuality, it's the original reality television program, and it truly is reality TV because it's very difficult to watch it after the fact. For the most part, you're watching it in real time, and there's an attentive audience that is tuning in to view those broadcasts. To give you a little bit of perspective related to the Rockets side of things, so on the left-hand side, household impressions for Rockets, it's about half for Rockets what it is for the Astros. But just to give you some perspective, about 50,000 individuals will tune in for a Rockets game. Again, the age demographic, 18 to 49, about 30,000. That 35 to 64 adults, which is the second from the right column, about 42,000. That's the bulk of those that are tuning in will be between the ages of 35 and 64. Anybody have any questions about any of that information so far?
I don't see anything right now. David, you can go right ahead. Keep going.
Okay, great. All right. So, like many of us, this past year has been an interesting 12 months for sure with the pandemic. We have had to completely re-engineer the way we produce live sports. And as a consumer of live sports, you may be aware of some of those changes. For the most part, you probably are watching those games and unaware of some of the aspects of the live game production that's taken place behind the scenes. And if we're doing our job right, you don't know. You can't tell the change in the way we're doing it. So pre-pandemic, at a really high level, announcers and crew would travel with the team for all road games. So home games and road games. Our crew, we would have a crew that would travel with the team. They would be embedded with complete access, complete engagement with that team, whether it was home or away, and on-site production trucks specific to our broadcast and freelancers and contractors that we would hire in those road cities that would work directly for us and provide us that game broadcast. Post-pandemic, whether it was because the NBA moved into a bubble over in Orlando last year, or Major League Baseball, where they restricted the travel, we've been forced to completely re-engineer the way we do our broadcasts. Over the past 12 or 14 months. We do not travel our announcers or crew. The games are produced by that home team. So if the game is coming to us from Anaheim, for example, the production group would work for that Anaheim RSN, and they would provide to us what is referred to as a global feed. So the visiting team, that would be us. We take the global feed and we integrate all of our graphics so that the broadcast looks like it is ours. We integrate that in our home studio, in our home control room. Our announcers, reporters, everyone they are all broadcasting and doing that road game from our studio here in Houston. And so they are looking at monitors in the studio and calling the game. There are some broadcast outlets that have their announcers calling games from their home, whether it's in their basement or their study. They have all of their feeds going to a monitor in an individual's workstation, and they're broadcasting from multiple locations as they're doing those world feed broadcasts. So it's created an absolutely different model for us. It's different approach. It is in some ways more efficient, in other ways not as effective. And so if you're watching a live broadcast, you'll sometimes hear an announcer talk about the fact that he off camera hasn't seen a particular play, or make reference to the fact that he doesn't know exactly what the infraction or the argued call is about because he hasn't seen that on his screen yet. We also are limited to the number of camera angles that we have access to. We're also hyper reliant on that home team to provide us a game feed that is balanced and gives us the same sort of coverage to a game that would be partial to the Astros. So it looks like an Astros broadcast, as opposed to the example I used earlier, as opposed to really featuring and leaning more heavily towards the Anaheim Angels players and calling a game that looks more like an Angels broadcast. But we've been able to adjust accordingly. We have individual cameras that we do control. They operate from that venue, but our director is the one that tells them what to shoot on those cameras, and we integrate that into our broadcast. But for the most part, it is a completely different exercise, and we've been forced, because of the pandemic, to adjust accordingly for the safety and security of not just our staff, but also the players. Our folks come into contact when they go into an away marketplace, come in contact with a lot of individuals, and then for them to climb on a charter with the team and come in close contact with the players would be quite a challenge for sure. So we've worked around that situation. We've adjusted accordingly. I think that there are a number of aspects of the way that we do broadcast now that will continue beyond the pandemic, even once we are clear to start traveling. I think there's some aspects of this from a technical side that we will continue to use because of certain efficiencies and economy of scale, that sort of thing, as we move forward. So those are a couple of slides that I put together for you. You have any questions that you want to talk about, or any aspects of what we do that you want some insight on?
Okay, Dave, we do have a question from Mr. William Baker. And his question is, how much harder has it been to call the games for the announcers?
It is, I will tell you that they have done an outstanding job, but in the conversations that I'm having with them on an ongoing basis, it's a challenge. The difference between, and there's a number of aspects, right? There's a difference between being at a venue and being able to see the entire playing surface and call that game, right? As opposed to being restricted to what the camera operator, and in between you and the camera operator, the director wants you to see. And then on top of that, you talk about the energy and the excitement that comes along with fans in the stands. And there's a complete departure, sort of a watering down of that experience. And they're the conduit of that experience for the fans at home. So it does have an impact. We've taken a not so informal survey of our announcers, and categorically, their response is, if I could have the access that we had prior to pandemic, I would be in favor of being at the venue as opposed to being remote. But without that access, it also makes it really, really difficult. I think the other thing, going back to one of the other nuances, changes, and challenges is, right, with no crowd noise in those buildings, with the exception of the crowd noise that was manufactured, home stadiums and arenas sort of pumping in faux crowd noise, that's sometimes deceiving as well, and makes it really, really difficult for the announcers to sort of be able to pick up the flow of the game. And there is a flow that happens during the broadcast. Not being in a building and being able to sort of interpret that and then convey that through the call, it tampers down a little bit of the energy and excitement that the announcers bring to the broadcast. That would be probably the most significant difference, right? The largest attraction to what we're doing now versus the way we've done it before.
Yeah, but you mentioned that COVID-19 has brought a lot of challenges. Being a general manager and obviously counting the money and looking at where things are going. So, have you looked at this from a perspective of, hey, we can save some money by not traveling as much, or we can do this? I mean, so I know cost has been a big issue for a general manager in your shoes. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it is certainly something that we have considered. My primary responsibility is making sure at the end of the day that we're a business, right? And so we have to make business decisions. There is a balance, though, between saving money and what we're sort of our commitment to the viewer, which is we're going to provide you the absolute best live sports coverage possible. Our objective is to deliver a network quality broadcast on a regional level. And that's not an inexpensive proposition by any means. Oftentimes we will talk about, that same question that we're asking the announcers, right? If we could go back to the way we were doing it before, I would tell you we'd go back to probably 90% of the way we did it before. We would not eliminate the travel just to eliminate the travel. Would we move to a model at some point? I think universally, regional sports networks will likely move to a world feed or a global feed model where there is only on-site one production truck and they are feeding to both the home and the road. But our crew and our announcers are still most likely going to go to that venue so that we don't lose those, the finer aspects of the quality of the broadcast. I think those folks will continue to travel. Your producer director may stay back. You may invest your money differently. Invest it into the control room and equipment you need to be able to do the national broadcast quality regional cast out of a production control room that's here so that you're not renting that truck all over the country. But I don't think that we would be in favor of saving all of the money that we've not been able to invest in the broadcast over the last year.
I have a good question from one of our instructors here, Dr. Tanisha Taylor. Social media engagement is a huge part of sports. What sorts of things do you think regional sports networks do better than most to engage fans on social media? It's
a really great question, and social media is a critical part of a couple of things, right? We see it as a brand extension for our network, a brand extension for our team partners. We also see it as an engagement tool for our fans, so that we can have ongoing dialogue with individuals. And from that perspective, those three areas, we think it's a really important undertaking for us. We use it for highlights. We use it to promote the programming that we have. And in addition to that, we see it as a really valuable tool for us to provide that extra exposure for our reporters who have access that no one else in the market has. And so on the basketball side, Kaylee Griffin, and on the baseball side, Julia Morales, right? They have such a close relationship with the two organizations and the players on those teams. They're getting information and they are embedded with those teams. So there's nobody else that knows the team as well as they do. That social media platform gives them one more avenue to be able to sort of share that information and insight. And then from an engagement standpoint, within our broadcast, we integrate social media where we'll ask for fans to tell us, their opinion on a particular topic. We'll also ask them to sort of talk about their favorite memories, whether it's on the Rocket side or the Astros side. And that engagement affords the play-by-play announcers the ability to incorporate that into the broadcast and bring more flavor and engagement. We think that's a really important part of it as well. You couldn't do that until recently, where you had those platforms for that communication, right? It used to be just one way. We would throw it at you. We would tell you what we think. And now we have that ability to create the dialogue a little bit, which I think has a lot of value.
Well, I think the same thing with ESPN. Do you think that social media helped you guys during the pandemic? I mean, did that help keep you guys alive and interacting with those players? When COVID hit, what happened? People went to Facebook, they went to Instagram, they went to everything they could find out there because they're at home. So now all the eyeballs are there on the social media platforms watching you guys. So you guys are still working, right? You guys are still getting the players, and the players are sending in video to you guys. And so from a local standpoint, that helped you guys, right?
No question. There's no question about it. I will tell you, we're really unique in that during the shutdown period, right, where baseball was not playing and basketball was not playing, when you're a network like ours, that's the lifeblood of our network, right? We were, for all intents and purposes, we were shut down as well. We did air historical games, previous broadcasts, that sort of thing. We did do things over on social media to promote that. The challenge is, it's sort of the blessing and the curse. People come in droves to watch live sports for their local team. There's an affinity there that is really, really strong and very, very attractive. If it's not live, the attractiveness sort of goes away. The vast majority of people turn their attention to news and other things that were going on. So that was a really, really cloudy period for us, for lack of a better description. I don't want to necessarily say dark, because we did make a concerted effort to make sure that we continued to sort of promote the brands that are on our network. But it was a challenging period. There's no question about it. And then, you sort of going back to that conversation earlier about, responsibility from a business perspective, how much time and energy and money do you want to invest in programming that folks really are not going to go and watch, right? Our network is driven by the team's schedule. Folks know when the Astros are on, I'm going to watch it on AT&T SportsNet. They don't come to our channel by accident, right? It's unlikely to be a channel that you're sort of just going to click through and find. For the most part, it's a destination channel for folks. And so during that period of time, it was challenging. We made the decision of what to sort of focus on, which were re-airs of previous or historic games, and not get into too much new production during that period.
Probably had a lot of your diehard sports fans going back and watch those historic games, right?
There were some, no doubt about it. There were some great games, and I'm not originally from Houston, so for me, the opportunity to see some really classic games
Right.
on the Rockets side and the Astros side was really a treat to see those. I wasn't fortunate enough to watch them first time around, and in some cases they were even before I would have been watching sports. So from that standpoint, it was really neat. And from a network's perspective, the ability to be able to still, we had to program the ability to have those teams on our network during a period of time, thinking back to it, which was, very uncertain, about what would transpire in the near or further future. So no doubt about it.
Have another question from one of our students. Do you guys still get to talk to players during games, like in-game interviews? And also, has there been more of a focus on social media engagement since there are no fans? I think we just answered that portion, but the first part.
We did. Hey, really good question. In fact, when I was pulling together my slides, you probably noticed I pulled them from a bunch of different decks that I had. But I actually was going to put together sort of a collage of the way we covered the team visually, the way we covered the team before the pandemic and after, and a shot of our announcer standing with the mic right next to the player, and the way we do it now. And unfortunately, I just didn't pull it together in time for our discussion today. But it is different. We still get a chance to talk to the players. And so I'll use the Rockets for example. We have access to one of the assistant coaches or the head coach of the team at halftime, sort of a walk-off interview. We do that remotely. Our announcer, our reporter is sitting at a desk, which is in a plexiglass cube, sort of at mid-height in the arena, and she's on camera. And we have a camera person that has been tested for COVID before he has access and is credentialed to be at the court level. And that camera operator, and we do a 2-box. Post-game, all of our interviews are done by Zoom. And so we do coach, key players. Again, we will have our reporter in her workstation, which is dedicated and separate from everybody else. And then the players are one by one brought into that space, and they're available to the media as a part of Zoom. So that's another area where, to be honest with you, we would be a part of what's commonly referred to as the scrum. That's where all reporters sort of gather around and get some sound and ask some questions. Our reporters usually afforded the ability to ask first and last, but we also have access, in addition to that, we get the walk-off interview with the star of the game. And we also can sort of stay around after the fact and get more coverage because we're there and we have that access that the locals don't. And now it's a little bit more confined. And that's a bit of a challenge. Our producers pull their hair out related to that for sure.
All right, got another question from one of our professors here. The teams that you guys cover the teams that you guys cover face a lot of controversy. How do you create content that focuses on the game rather than the controversy when controversy drives the numbers?
Yep. So our responsibility is to cover the game. And it's a really good question. We are the eyes and ears of the fans. And from our perspective, we talk about it from this standpoint. We don't want to be the news, make the news, break the news. We're there to be those eyes and ears. We are covering the game. We are calling the game the way we see it, but we're covering the game. And that's our central focal point, regardless of what is going on. If there's things that are happening outside of the competition, From our standpoint, we think the responsibility of that coverage is for somebody else, not necessarily for us. Now, we don't shy away from, you know, interviewing players and talking to them about the performance or things that are going on with the team. But the primary focus for us is the coverage and the call, the broadcast, conveying what we see as a part of the competition that takes place during those games.
Okay. All right. So let me see. I got another question here from one of our professors here. Thank you for great information. My question is, where do you see the future of live sports production post the pandemic?
I think it will definitely take advantage of some of the things that we have experienced over the past 12 months. I think that we will look for cost efficiencies. A lot of the things that we were forced to do this past year and currently are doing are things that we had talked about doing 5 years from now. All of that's been accelerated. And so I don't think we immediately go back to the old way of doing it. You know, it's a little bit like one of those situations where you sort of have set a goal, and until you start sort of, you know, whether it's run a marathon or walk 5 miles a day, until you go out that first time, it's just sort of out there in the distance. And some of these evolutionary changes, sort of the innovations that we've integrated into the broadcast now, they were aspirational goals 5 years off. Well, we're going to do remote broadcast, right? All RSNs are going to move to that model. But because they're not all controlled by one organization or one business, really difficult to sync everybody up until there is a reason for doing that. Well, the pandemic was the reason for everybody to go to these global feeds. Now that we're doing it, it's likely that we will continue to take advantage of some of the aspects of those global feeds moving forward. The integration here remotely, we also refer to them as REMI broadcasts, where you have the camera feeds. We'll have 8 feeds coming from a remote location into our control room, and we'll do the full integration and production on our end. We had talked about that years off. It's now. And so it's unlikely that we will go back to the old way of doing it 100%. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing, right? A lot of times, regardless of what business you're in, situations create the need for innovation. And we are probably living proof of that right now. And you just want to make sure that you're taking advantage of that innovation in the right way. And going back to the question you asked earlier, Arthur, and that point of, hey, are you going to put that money to your bottom line? Most likely will not, right? We'll most likely invest more heavily in the technology side of things that makes that, you know, closer to the absolute same quality that we were sort of investing in one-offs, but we'll invest it now and then reap the benefits moving forward.
When I was working over at KHOU, and, you know, we saw a lot of transformations. Microwave truck, satellite truck, to the backpacks that you put on your back. And I sent, it was funny, we had, I think the Texans were playing in Mexico, and we had received these backpacks from TVU. So I sent them out, and I'm like, is this really going to work? But fortunately, we have the Ethernet cable sitting right there. So I called the guys there from, you know, that was in Mexico, and they said, you know, yeah, just come on down. I said, just give me 5 megs up, and I can do a live shot. Couldn't do that 20 years ago. Couldn't do that 10 years ago. You know, but here we are, this is like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and we were there. And that technology, same thing you're saying, it wasn't great then, but man, a year later, it was outstanding. You know, so now we're getting 10 megs up, we're getting 15 megs up and 20 megs up. So I think, you know, like you said, some of this is still here. I mean, some of this will be here for the next, you know, next 5 years, 10 years, and it's going to change. It's going to get better for us, I think. But being able to communicate with people using your cell phone and to be able to get your players anywhere they are and be able to get them to do something with you, you know, we relaxed on the quality just a little bit, and we can get more content. So I think you were right in saying that. some of this will stay, and will give us more access. And we had it out there already, but as professionals, we're like,
Yep.
that's not good enough quality. But now it is.
Well, I mean, you are spot on, Arthur. And here's the interesting dynamic that's at play. You have the convergence of the expectation from a viewer perspective, right? And the technology or the need to innovate on the other side. And, as broadcast professionals, you're hesitant to do things that might sort of dilute the quality of what you have right now to sort of advance and take advantage of some other things. But with the advent of the handheld device, right? The consumer's expectation is different than it was 18 months ago, 3 years ago, right? And it's interesting you should mention, the device. We just upgraded our announcers' iPhones, and we did that specifically and moved them to the most recent version of an iPhone because we will now have them shoot content that we will be able to use on our network. Technology has come to a point where, there's a difference. If you are, a technician in that specific area, you're going to see the quality difference. But the viewer doesn't have an expectation that's great. They'd prefer to see that interaction with the player or the great interview and maybe a little bit coming off of the quality, provided you get it. And the accessibility piece of it from a reporter standpoint, right? The ability to literally shoot right there and get after that, that interview right there sort of outweighs the dilution of the quality just a little bit. Flexibility, all of that. And then the quality is it's gonna absolutely catch up. There's no doubt about it. In newsrooms all across the country, right? Reporters are going out with their handheld device now. How many times have you seen stories shot on some form of a mobile device now? You don't even need the backpack anymore. You don't have to carry that thing around. And there are a lot of local sports reporters that are going into the locker room and they are shooting it right on their phones. And they're using that as their primary tool now. And then the other aspect, you alluded to this as well, right? Our reporters really hesitant to do Zoom until they realized that players would make themselves available in their car, in their home, while they're walking their dog. I don't have to meet up with you at the ballpark, 30 minutes before the game. Hey, sure, let's fire up and do an interview. Or they're on the road and we're here, and that ability to just sort of get them online and do that interview. I would even suggest to you, this a year ago, we wouldn't be doing this, right? And so my schedule would have to have been an hour before I arrive, a couple of minutes for you and I to catch up, this presentation, then I got to get all of that. Now, literally, you and I are texting and talking to each other minutes before it's time to go. So it's changed that dynamic as well, which is a positive move forward. Would we have gotten here at some point? Probably. We would have been really hesitant had we not been forced to do it. And so if there's a learning there anywhere for folks that are in school studying right now, what I would suggest to you is, in my group and any place I've ever worked, the individuals that get their foot in the door, the individuals that advance are the ones that are open to innovate. They're the ones that are open to change and adopt change more freely, more frequently. They're also the ones that come in and say, hey, I have an idea. How about if we do this media day, the communications week, via Zoom technology as opposed to everybody in person, right? Those are the people, honestly, I mean this genuinely, the ones that come in and say, have you thought about this? Or when someone in the room says, let's think about it a little bit differently, and folks say, yeah, how about we do X, Y, and Z? Those are the ones that generally get their foot in the door and the ones that advance more expeditiously.
We have about 5 minutes here, actually, and you actually hit something that was really great. I was going to ask you about that. As of right now, okay, basically in the sports world, if a student is graduating and they're interested in getting their foot in the door in sports, whether it's your local TV, whether it's regional television or regional sports, what advice? Because I will give them advice of social media. Get in, learn social media, go in and do exactly what we just talked about. Go in and say, hey, I got this great footage that I shot. Here's a story I shot on my iPhone. Get that job on the web, because we need people to do that. That's what I would recommend. And I recommended that for a lot of our students coming out several years ago. And I still recommend that now. So what would you recommend?
I'm making some notes. It's another slide that I had on here and then I took out because
Okay.
I didn't want to bore everybody. But it's a great question, and I appreciate you asking. You hit on something that's incredibly valuable. What I say to young folks starting out, whether it's in sports, in media, in entertainment, broaden your definition, broaden your perspective of how you define each one of those. And so let's use media specifically. So if you want to be in sports media, you want to be in media, right? Think about it not just as working in for the local television station in Houston, Texas, right? There's three opportunities, maybe 4 or 5 opportunities in this particular marketplace. Whereas if you do what you just said, right? Maybe it is to cover news from a digital perspective. From a sports perspective, in fact, we have a phenomenal example of it. Kaylee Griffin, she started by covering the San Antonio Spurs in digital content. That was her job. Then she moved to Cleveland and she covered the Cavaliers. She did digital and she filled in for their reporter. We saw the work she had done. She looked great. She had a lot of potential. She had done the coverage side of it. We hired her to do full-time reporter work for us. And the bonus for us is she has that social media digital coverage experience, which we really needed and wanted to build out. So I would say to folks just starting out, broaden your perspective. Don't just think about traditional forms of media, because not only are the RSNs that I just listed, right, they all have digital, which will give you a foot in the door, an opportunity. There are also pro teams that are fully building out their in-house digital teams. And all of the local media outlets also have an entry in through digital. So I think that's a really good place to start and really good thing to think about. The other dynamic with social is, and do not discount this because I've seen this as well, and that is that notion of self-publishing. Find a niche and find an opportunity to do what you're passionate about and simply self-publish it. Create a channel of your own. And 10 years ago, 6 years ago, referred to as blogging. Right now, it's not even blogging. It's TikTok or on Instagram. Though that skill set of doing that work, whether it's storytelling, whether it is producing content in some fashion or form, or whether you want to be in front of the camera, that skill set and that experience is transferable. And then the other suggestion, find any and every way you have to intern, work freelance, get your foot in the door by doing the job and proving that you are capable. There's nothing more effective than being on an internship, which is really a 6-month job interview. I can't tell you how many times that we have recommended or hired directly from somebody who started either as a freelancer or an intern in an organization that I was a part of. Very, very rarely in what I refer to as closed industries. So closed in terms of there's a limited number of opportunities. Sports, media, entertainment. I can't wake up tomorrow and start another RSN, right? it's a fixed number. And the number of jobs we have, it may grow by one or two each year, but it's really pretty well capped. So from your perspective, getting your foot in the door is key. And the way to do that is freelance and internship. Look for those opportunities. Don't be so finely defined on what you want to do. Experiment and experience different things. And look for things that have transferable skills so that you can take what you learn and then move it along.
David, you've been a great asset, man, to the students, and thank you for joining us. And guys, this is a wealth of information for you. I cannot tell you how important this is. And if you're in my class, you automatically know how important this is. So, David, thank you.
Thank
we'll
you.
see you again, David. Appreciate it.
I appreciate the invite. Thanks.